contributor, former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich, along with North Carolina Congressman Dan Bishop is with us. All right, Mr. Speaker, you said this is a win for McCarthy. He just tweeted out it's the largest cut in history. Let's get your take on it.
Well, look, I think it's pretty straightforward. If you look at where we were going, which was the Biden position of no amendments of any kind, no negotiations, just keep raising the debt ceiling, go business as usual. And you look where over 100 days, the House Republicans, who shocked the country by actually passing a bill that had real change, real reform, real cuts. And the truth is, we are not nearly as well off as we'd like to be because we didn't have a Republican president to negotiate with, but we're dramatically better off than we would have been if we just rolled over for Joe Biden. So the question, I think, for Republicans, and probably where Congressman Bishop and I have the deepest disagreement, is the consequence of a no vote. I believe, having done this, as you know, in my new book, A March to the Majority, where I explain how we spent 4 years negotiating with Bill Clinton, getting to the only 4 years of a balanced budget in your lifetime. We did it one step at a time. Well, this is the first step. Now, Republicans can decide it's a pretty reasonable first step, not everything they want, but it starts the game towards the balanced budget, towards appropriations this fall. Remember, what McCarthy did was establish a ceiling, not a basement. So you can cut from the ceiling down further.
Is it fair to say then that you believe, based on your experience, and you were the last speaker to balance the budget, to your credit, I give you a lot of credit for that, that it has to be a process, that in reality it's a process? What if the Republicans just stood firm on their debt ceiling increase that the CBO scored out at $4.8 trillion in savings over 10 years? What would have happened then? And then we'll get to the congressman.
Biden would have said no. The financial markets would have collapsed. The Republicans would have been crowded into a position where 20 or 30 of them would have joined the Democrats, and 6 or 8 of them would have joined the Democrats in the Senate, and you would have a debt ceiling with no cuts, no changes, no reforms. I mean, this is chess. This is not checkers. It's not tic-tac-toe. And you've got to think through not just one step, but 5, 6, or 8, or 10 steps. And in that consequence, I think that Kevin McCarthy got a pretty good deal, and most importantly, he shifted the balance of power and the balance of leadership away from both the Senate and the White House, and that is, frankly, a historic experience comparable to what we did in 1995.
Yeah, and Dan, you know, well, I mean, remember, Biden started out saying he wouldn't compromise at all, and then went missing in action for 97 days. Let's get your take on the bill.
Well, I agree with former Speaker Gingrich to a point. That is to say that the bill that Republicans passed on the floor of the House with 218 votes was a great bill, and we were unified in doing it. I know something about that. We created the unity when we went through the speaker's fight in January. The problem is that when Speaker McCarthy entered into this negotiation, he gave up the farm. Speaker Gingrich describes a bunch of benefits. We've spoken earlier about this when he wrote an article on Fox News about it and listed a lot of these things. When you read the text of the bill, they're not there. The CBO just today, this afternoon, released information, an estimate about the so-called work requirements that were added to food stamps and to temporary assistance for needy families. They've said that because of the additional categories of exemptions that were added in the language of the bill, the cost is going to go up by $2.1 billion. That's not a get. That's in fact, so in case after case, Speaker's team has come out and told us that we touted benefits. When you read the language of the bill, they're not there. I was just in the conference earlier this evening, and Mr. McCarthy's negotiator talked about the provision on the IRS, taking that 80, it turns out to be $1.4 billion, not 1.9 as they claimed, but it doesn't do anything to stop them from hiring staff with the remaining $78.6 billion, hiring new IRS agents this year. Now,
let me ask the Speaker about that, if you don't mind, Congressman. That was a big promise of the Republicans to defund the hiring or the doubling of the IRS agents. Why didn't they hold the line on that? And I don't think it was unreasonable, the Republicans, to say we're going to go back to 2023 spending levels with a 1% baseline budgeting cap. To me, they were reasonable provisions. And I can understand people's anger at that, because that seemed, the IRS in particular, seemed to be a big issue for Republicans, Mr. Speaker.
Well, as I understand it, and I went back, I thought Congressman Bishop was very effective on your show this afternoon, so effective that I went back to the Speaker's staff and talked to them about several of these issues. And all I can report to you is, for this year, they don't have the money to hire the additional agents. And this fall, in the appropriations bill, Republicans will have every opportunity to continue that process. Again, this is a 1 year, this is a process. The question is, will we be stronger coming out of this in continuing to cut out the IRS agents, or will we be weaker? I'm told, by the way, that a number of Democrats are so shaken by the cut in domestic discretionary spending that they're talking about taking away $20 or $30 billion of the IRS money to put it to other priorities that they think are a lot more important. So I think you've got to be, there are a lot of details here, and I think each side has a different version of what the details mean. But I would suggest to you that each of these steps, as small as they are in fact steps away from bigger spending. You've had the New York Post, the Wall Street Journal, hardly left-wing institutions, both have said this is a significant step in the right direction. They have technical experts, at least as good as Congressman Bishop, and they have looked at it and they've concluded that on balance, this is a significant step away from bigger government, not a victory by itself. If you said to me, is this the end game? I'd say vote no. If you say to me, this is the first step, I would say vote yes.
Dan?
Sean,
Yes,
I really can't believe my ears when folks tell me, well, it doesn't matter if it's not in the language of the bill. What are they saying? They've got a handshake agreement with Joe Biden? I can't believe that. But here's the real killer. It took the debt ceiling out to the January 1, 2025, a year longer than the Republican bill proposed. Here's a piece of information for your viewers. I just heard it tonight from the speaker in the conference. He said the reason that happened was his call. It wasn't even asked for by the Democrats. He didn't want to end up in another negotiation with Joe Biden next year because he believed that they would ask for more. That's what he said. You understand, that's a $4 trillion, maybe $5 or $6 trillion increase in debt that we just let him have, and the speaker says he made the call. I don't understand that, and it doesn't make sense. It fractured Republican unity that was so hard won. We're going to have to figure out how to put that back together. I don't know what happens with this bill. It probably passes with Democrat votes.
Now, you talked earlier about the need maybe for a motion to vacate when Kevin McCarthy became Speaker. That was an issue. Any one member can basically call for this no confidence vote in the Speaker. You said earlier today that's under consideration. You believe that's going to happen?
What I said, Sean, is it seems inescapable to me, given what has occurred and the way he was the steward of Republican unity, and he blew it to smithereens.
But now, there was a report, one report that said you would be the guy that did it. Is that true?
That's not how I said it. And I don't go off doing things like that half-cocked or for my own personal interest or out of any animus. There are people very serious people we worked with very hard. Sean, Speaker Gingrich was a critic. You were a critic of us in January. But the result we achieved.
Actually, I wasn't a critic. I didn't mind the process. I just thought you guys should have done it earlier. That should have happened over Christmas. We should have been ready to hit the ground running, was my argument, just to be clear.
The point, Sean, is that we actually achieved something that almost shocked the country in that process. And the unity that was won so that we could put this bill on the floor and pass it when people said we were too fractious to do it, they were wrong. And why would you go into a negotiation without calling folks on something that fundamental and blow up the unity? I understand Speaker Gingrich, he was the speaker.
Let me ask Speaker Gingrich.
Well,
I'm not trying to interrupt you, Congressman.
Okay.
I want to be fair to both sides here. Congressman, what seems to be lacking in this, and I may be wrong, is as the Speaker was negotiating with the White House, it sounds like he was not communicating with his caucus. And it seems to me that that needed to be a big part of the process, especially when you take into account that the margin of Republicans' majority is so small.
That question is to Speaker Gingrich.
I can't comment on that because I wasn't part of that process. But I'll say this. Having, I think, pretty successfully negotiated with Bill Clinton for 4 years and having produced welfare reform, the largest capital gains tax cut in history, and the only 4 consecutive balanced budgets in your lifetime, I actually think there's a lot of wisdom in saying to people, you wouldn't necessarily win a second round on the debt ceiling next year. What you can win, I say this to all the conservatives, if you think you can win, you're going to have a whole series of appropriations bills this fall. Congressman Massey got introduced and McCarthy got adopted a provision that if the Congress doesn't pass all their appropriations bills, there's an automatic, for all government, cut in spending. So there's a huge incentive to get this done. And my point would be,
guys,
that conservatives have lots of opportunities in the next year and a half to make their case. But to do that, the stronger they are, the more unified they look, and the greater the degree that what the House Republicans become the center of gravity, the better off we are. And if this bill goes down, don't kid yourself. What you're going to get out of that is a clean debt ceiling with no reforms, because people will crumble under the weight of the financial community and the fear of a deficit of the United States defaulting. And so I think this is a huge gamble to decide that a no vote is acceptable.
All right, Congressman, I'll give you 20 seconds. I'm way over time here.
Thanks, Sean. Look, the problems are what are not in the bill. Speaker Gingrich just referred to another one. There is no auto CR in the bill. There is a 1% reduction, but and he's also right that we can't get in a position where we're split apart and you end up with a clean ceiling that goes on forever. But that's why this has to be better operated. We'll fix it, but I'm not sure how right now.
All right. Thank you. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.